Okay, boys and girls, so we're going to continue with our reading of Dark Day in the Deep Sea. And before we get started, I want you to make sure you have all your supplies ready. So go ahead and grab your sticky notes. Go ahead and grab your scratch paper to write on. So as we are reading, you can be writing down any questions that pop up into your head. And then hopefully they'll be answered with the text for us. Okay, so let's get started here. We read chapters 1, 2, and 3 last week. So let's kind of review. Think to yourself, what happened in chapter 1? Who were our characters that we were introduced to in chapter 1? Who are our main characters? So Jack and Annie are our main characters, and we were introduced also to Teddy and Kathleen, and their purpose was to send Jack and Annie on a mission for Merlin to look for his happiness, his ways to find happiness. And so Kathleen and Teddy, they sent them on their way to another place, and where they landed was was it on a mountain? Was it in the city? Was it on a beach? It was on the beach, wasn't it? So they were on the beach, and as they were looking out over the beach, they noticed that something was out in the ocean. And what did they see out in the ocean? Was it sharks? Was it a volcano? Was it a tall mast ship? Which it was, wasn't it? And then what happened? What happened that they saw happening here? If you look here, we see that a small rowboat with how many men came on ashore? So it was 1, 2, 3 men came ashore. How many were the sailors? 1, 2. And we have this character here. Do you remember what his name was? And what he did? Well, that was Professor Henry. So we were introduced to Professor Henry in chapter 3. And in chapter 3, we got to find out what was it about Henry, what was he doing? Because he had a special mission that he was on, and he was actually a scientist, wasn't he? Okay, so he had been looking for this particular shell, and he was able to get what he wanted, and then he was going to go back on the ship. And who did he take back with him? Jack and Annie. They talked themselves into going back. So we're going to continue now with chapter 4. Okay, chapter 4, off the ship. The wind's against us, Joe said as he and Tommy rowed. Even after the boat moved past the breakers, it kept bouncing up and down on the swell of the waves. Water splashed over the sides and soaked Jack's clothes. But Jack wasn't worried about the wind or the water. He was worried about being seasick because waves of nausea had started to come over him. So do you know how you feel when you are seasick? Sometimes it's also if you get car sick, you get that icky feeling, and it feels like you're going to be sick. So not a fun feeling. Okay. Sorry, it's a bit tough going, Henry said. We can take it, Annie said. We hope, thought Jack, and the last thing he wanted to do was throw up, especially in front of Joe and Tommy. Again, who were Joe and Tommy? They were the sailors. We should get back just in time to see the men haul up this morning's catch, said Henry. This is so much fun, said Annie, and her eyes shining as the little rowboat bobbed up and down. Jack wasn't having any fun at all. To keep from being sick, he gripped his backpack, closed his eyes, and gritted his teeth. Every day we make new discoveries, said Henry, off the coast of Argentina. I wonder, where's Argentina? Do you know? Maybe you need to find out. We found over 100 new species, giant worms several feet long, shrimp the size of lobsters. Caught them in our nets, didn't we, Joe? Aye, said Joe as he pulled on the oars, but the creature that's never been caught is the one these mates should be worried about. What creature is that? Asked Annie. The great monster, answered Tommy. Jack opened his eyes. What? You mean like a shark? He asked. What do you think the great monster could be? No, no, lad, 'tis much worse than any shark. Even the 20-foot tiger shark that's been following us, said Tommy. The sailor blinked nervously. Whoa, 20-foot tiger shark, thought Jack, and he looked at the dark water for a shark fin. Aye, the monster's much bigger than any shark, shouted Joe. They say it looks like a cross between a dragon and a gigantic starfish. Nay, more like floating nest of snakes, mate, said Tommy with a shudder. They say it'll curl around your body and strangle you to death. A floating nest of snakes, Annie asked. Jack gulped. He turned to Henry. Have you seen the monster? He asked the scientist. Henry shook his head. I've never seen it, he said, but a few of our crewmen claim to have glimpsed something monstrous in these waters just yesterday. Don't be scared, mate, said Joe. If we see a monster, we'll hurl our harpoons at him. Harpoons? Do you know what a harpoon is? Can you take a guess? Is that one of your wondering questions? We'll shoot him with our cannons, said Tommy. He and Joe laughed loudly. Maybe the sailors on the ship are just trying to scare the scientists, Jack thought hopefully. Why else would they be laughing? And when they reached the HMS Challenger, the rowboat drew alongside the big ship, rocking in the water. Jack gripped his pack tighter as more waves of seasickness washed over him. You go first, mate, Joe said to Jack. You're looking a bit green. That's a phrase. It's an interesting phrase. Do you kind of know what it might mean? Clutching his pack under one arm, Jack grabbed the sides of the ladder. He held on tightly and climbed from the wooden hull of the ship up to the top deck. Annie came after him, then Henry, Joe, and Tommy. And when they were all on the deck, the two seamen hauled up the rowboat. Jack took a long, deep breath. Though the large ship rocked in the wind, it wasn't nearly as bad as the small rowboat's movements on the waves. Looking around the deck, Jack saw teams of sailors working. Some were coiling thick ropes. Others were hauling up strange-looking buckets. Wonder what could be in the bucket. What do you think? Jack turned to ask Henry what the sailors were doing, but Henry was staring at a tall man in a white uniform and a heavy-set older man in a dark suit, who were walking briskly toward them. The two men were frowning. Oh, no, murmured Henry. Prepare to meet thy doom. Who are they? Asked Annie. Before Henry could answer, the man in the white shouted, What have you done this time, Mr. Moseley? And Jack moved closer to Annie. He clutched his pack to his life vest. Well, Captain, started Henry. Goodness, what have you brought up from the sea now, Henry? The portly man asked. A four-legged, four-armed creature of the deep? Yes, Professor. It's a Jack and Annie from America, said Henry. I found the creature vacationing on the island. The portly man smiled. Oh, I see. I thought perhaps it was a monster that was sighted by some of the men yesterday. The monster again, thought Jack. This ship is not a place for children, Mr. Moseley, the captain said gruffly. Yes, I know, sir, said Henry, but these two are extraordinary. They hardly seem like children at all. They're quite independent and have great knowledge of the sea. I thought it might be permissible. Permissible. That's an interesting word. Do you think you know what it might mean? To bring them aboard for the afternoon and then return them to the shore. I'm afraid it's against all the ship's rules, said the captain. It's not Henry's fault, Captain, Annie piped up. We begged him to let us visit your ship. Ah, did you now? The portly man asked, his eyes twinkling. Why is that? We love the ocean, said Annie, and we'd really like to learn more about sea exploration, sir, said Jack. Well, you've come to the right place, said the man. Allow me to introduce myself. I'm Professor Thompson, the scientific director of the Challenger. The professor is one of the world's most renowned experts on the ocean, said Henry. Oh, so remember, Henry is a professor, and so is Professor Thompson. Wow, said Annie. Well, I don't know about that, the professor said modestly. But he put his thumbs in his vest and began speaking as if he were giving a lecture. Since the beginning of time, the secrets of the deep have been hidden from us. But now with our expedition, we have learned many things. Like what? Asked Jack. Well, we have used miles and miles of steel wire to measure the depth of the sea, said the professor. We have lowered thermometers to measure temperatures in the deep. But perhaps most important of all, we are learning about the amazing creatures who live in the dark regions from far beneath the ocean waves. Well, that is all well and good, Professor, the captain broke in, but I want these children off this ship immediately before the weather gets worse. Do you hear, Mr. Moseley? Off the ship! Well,